Dabo and the Clemson Tigers, they're new to the transfer portal. Oregon Ducks, not so much.
No.
And they do pretty damn well there.
Yeah, they dipped into it quite often. I think it was 14 last year. And you look at the guys that have come in, and this is what the portal does. The portal is to fill holes until your roster in the homegrown guys is developed. And the reality of it is that the world of recruiting, you hit, but you miss a lot more than you hit. And it isn't just player development, because there isn't a single program in the country that develops 100% of their players. In the world of college football, when you see numbers like 2,900 guys in the transfer portal, it is guys looking for better opportunities for themselves. But there's also coaches saying, hey, this isn't working. And either our roster is at a level to where we don't think that you can develop into one of those guys, and we are targeting other guys that are going to come in and compete. You may want to look for greener pastures. That is a majority of those 2,900 guys is coaches. And if you have a healthy culture and good communication between your players and their position coaches, coordinators, and head coach, there is an open, honest conversation about where a player is and how they fit. And, you see the mass exodus when players don't buy what the coach is selling them. Or there is no, we're just going to bring in everybody in the hard-ass way. Well, Oregon, you look at the guys that they brought in. Just this year alone, Dylan Gabriel, Jabbar Muhammad, Kobe Savage. Those guys have been absolutely massive this year alone via the portal. Over the last couple of years, Johnny Cornelius out of Rhode Island. You've got Tysheem Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson. I mean, there's been a lot of guys that Oregon has plugged those holes where they have built a team that is the number one seed in 13-0 and the only unbeaten in college football. The portal is wildly important, but you also need to be able to build through recruiting, and that's why you see such an emphasis by the elite programs. And Oregon ended up having the number 3 class, or two class nationally, composite 3, which did take a hit today because Dallas Wilson, the 5-star receiver out of Tampa, Florida, remember they got like the number 1 and 2 receivers. Yep. DeCorian Moore, is still on en route to Oregon. But on signing day, Dallas Wilson, there was that he's going to flip to Florida. Well, today he has asked for his release from his letter of intent and will be going to Florida. Things like that happen, sure, right? But the last 24 hours have been really good for Oregon in the portal because they've got holes to fill. You look at Josh Connerly, gone.
It's his NFL dude.
Yeah. Johnny Cornelius, gone. Yep. Eligibility up. And so there's a void at tackle. And what they did is they went out and they got Isaiah World, a 6'8", 300-pound tackle out of Nevada.
I mean, the Ducks bought by the pound because the 3 guys that they brought in, the 2 tackles and the tight end. You talk about World, 6'8", 300 pounds. Alex Harkey, 6'6", 300 pounds.
And he's a Texas State transfer, Harkey is, and he is a massive human being. And look, it becomes a numbers game on you bring guys in, you see which ones the fight to develop on guys that are on the roster. And for these guys to come in, can you beat out the guys we already have here because they're trying to build depth? You look at it, it's worked out for Oregon this year with just the way that the O-line has had to be shuffled around this year with Kavika Rogers injured early, Dave Iuli injured early. You had also Marcus Harper and Nishad Strother. The depth of the offensive line has been tested for Oregon. And we saw when Pancho was able to move back to center, that's when everything cleared up. And Bedford, who was the Indiana transfer that everybody had high hopes for coming into this year, being the starter, and he's been injured twice this year, he's going to have the opportunity to be back on this team too.
No, I mean, and then you throw in the tight end transfer who popped up from Louisville, 6'5", 265.
Yeah, Jamari Johnson, and this is going to be an interesting position to look at because you lose Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert this year on the roster already. You have Kenyon Sadiq, freak, saw that in the Big Ten championship game, and then Roger Sapialaga, who is a true freshman out of Utah, who is a guy that they're very high on. He's not redshirting this year. He's played a majority of his snaps on special teams, but he's going to be a guy that they feel very comfortable with both Roger and Kenyon heading into next year. But we see how many sets that Oregon uses their tight ends in, right? 13 personnel is not something that is unfamiliar to Oregon, which is 1 back and 3 tight ends. We have seen Sadiq, Ferg, and Herbert on the field at the same time. They need depth at that position.
And how they deploy them, because they're all very different. We were talking on Friday at the Radio Row with Jones about how Kenyon Sadiq is just a freak of an athlete. Yep. He joked about how can that brother be from Idaho? Like the whole idea of like where does an athlete like that come out of a place like that? Well, I mean, Jamari Johnson is not that type of dude. He's a massive human. And and so when you have those different versatile type players of how you're going to deploy them, where you're going to deploy them, it's more game planning, it's more things, it's more wrinkles, it's more ways to utilize guys.
There is a really interesting thing at play with Oregon as well, in that they had 4 position groups where they do need to reload. All right, corner, where you're losing a ton of guys, safety. Your back end of your defense, you are losing a lot in the back end of the defense. Offensive tackle and tight end. Those 4 position groups are the priority. We're sitting here on December 19th, and Oregon has picked up Dylan Thieneman from Purdue at safety,
who I believe is the top-rated safety in the transfer class.
Theron Johnson, the corner, all Big Ten corner out of Northwestern. The 2 tackles we just talked about, and a tight end. They're not waiting around and sitting back and waiting to see. They have been proactive as they're having this time off. And look, make no mistake about it, having a first-round bye, and this may only be an advantage unique to this year, having this first-round bye while the portal is open and as active as it is right now, that's a big advantage for Oregon too, is that they can continue recruiting as they're, fine-tuning things, self-scouting, advanced scouting, one of 2 potential opponents for the Rose Bowl coming up. This is where it's not just getting healthy, it's hitting the pavement and trying to find how you improve next year's roster after the early signing period right before the Big Ten championship game.
It's a good spot to be.
Yep.
That's why it's always better to not play the extra game.